Pies, back again with another demo. Today I have my sidekick Sam with me, and we are going to be demonstrating for you chocolate whoopie pies. And we're going to make what I know as a Hungarian flour frosting that we are going to fill it with. It's a little less sweet than buttercream, and I like that a little bit better in my chocolate whoopie pies. So I've pretty much got most of my stuff set up, some of it on camera, some of it off to the sides. Got my iPad with my recipe ready to go, so let's get started. For the whoopie pies, basically they are really cake. I think they call it pie because it's kind of in this round shape, like hand pies would be. So we're gonna need all-purpose flour, salt, unsweetened cocoa powder, baking soda, baking powder. So we're using 2 types of leavening agents in this one. We also are going to need a half a cup, which you should know by now is 1 stick of butter at room temperature. So we've had that sitting out so it's gotten nice and soft. We need a cup of regular granulated sugar, a large egg, a cup of buttermilk, which I'm going to teach you how to make because most people don't have buttermilk in their house and we currently don't. And then some vanilla. So let's get started. It says we're preheating the oven to 400 degrees, which we've already done. We are going to sift together the flour, the salt, the cocoa powder, the baking soda, and the baking powder. As you may remember from my last video, I said I don't own a sifter, so I am going to use my whisk to mix my ingredients together. So let's get that going. All right, so for the flour, we need 1 3/4 of a cup of all-purpose flour. So let's get that measured, Sam. So to make our 3/4 of a cup, we used a half cup and a 1/4 cup. You could use 3 1/4 cup measures, but the goal is to measure as little as possible so you prevent making mistakes. So the half cup and 1/4 cup is usually the recommended option. So we've got our flour in there. We need to add our salt. For the salt, we need a half a teaspoon. So I've got my salt, and I'm gonna grab my half teaspoon. Remember, you don't want to measure over the bowl, so I'm going to do this over the countertop and then level it off. Next thing that we need to add into there is the unsweetened cocoa powder, also called baking cocoa. It's pretty easy to find in the store. Most people buy the Hershey's brand. We happen to shop at Aldi's, so this is what we've got. So we've got our 3/4 of a cup of unsweetened cocoa powder in there. We need to add our 2 leavening agents, our baking soda, and our baking powder. Make sure not to confuse them. They are different quantities. They have different things that they do in the recipe as we've talked about. So ensure that you're measuring the correct one. So I need 1 1/2 teaspoons of baking soda and then a half teaspoon of baking powder. So as it said, we need to whisk all these ingredients together. Because the cocoa powder that I buy is not Hershey's brand, it is a little bit more lumpier and clumpier. Same thing when you buy powdered sugar. Usually if you buy the generic or the off brands, they can be a little bit more lumpy. So we want to make sure we do a really good job mixing this up today. So there you have it, nice and whisked together. All right, so it asks for the next part to line 2 baking sheets with parchment paper, which we've already done, and we've got those set and ready to go. And now we're gonna start combining the rest of our ingredients in the stand mixer, and then we're gonna add this at a later point. So I'm gonna put this on the counter behind us for now. Okay. For this part, it says that in a bowl of an electric mixer fitted with the paddle attachment, which we have here, we are going to cream together our butter and sugar. Remember, when it says to cream something, it's not asking you to use actual cream, it's asking you to create that creaming process with the butter and sugar being combined. And we are going to do that until it's light and fluffy. And from there, we're gonna add eggs, buttermilk, and vanilla. So what I wanna do before I get that creaming done is I actually wanna create my buttermilk and get that prepared and get my egg measured out so that when it's time, I can just add all of those ingredients in. So the way to make buttermilk is basically to take regular traditional milk and add some vinegar to it. It usually is 1 cup of milk to 1 tablespoon of vinegar. This particular recipe does call for 1 cup of milk, so we're gonna do the 1 cup of milk and the tablespoon of white vinegar. Remember, you want a liquid measuring cup for your milk, so you're gonna be my reader and you're gonna tell me when I get to the 1 cup measure. He's the perfect height to be able to see what's happening. And now we're gonna add our tablespoon of white vinegar. So just regular old white vinegar works just fine. It's always good to keep your workspace clean as much as you can. It just makes everything a little bit easier. We're gonna crack the egg in a separate bowl because remember, we don't want to crack things into the mix. There could be shells or blood or some other funky things going on with the egg. So it's important to crack them into a separate bowl. So these are the custard dishes that we use in our house for our eggs. We also are going to need vanilla. So I will get that ready to go. We need 1 teaspoon. Okay. Excellent. All right. So egg. Egg looks good. All right, so we have our egg, buttermilk, vanilla ready to go. In here, we are going to put our butter, which is 1 stick for 1/2 cup, and then our sugar, which we need 1 cup of granulated sugar. So we're gonna need to measure that out as well. All right, so let's put this down. We're gonna lock this and we're gonna get it going. So when you're creaming, you want to let it go for longer than you think it should. A lot of times people do not cream their ingredients enough, and so then they don't get incorporated and they don't get that kind of fluffy consistency, that creamy texture that you're looking for. So I'm going to show you what this looks like. You'll see there we've got pretty fluffy. It's all nicely combined. It basically almost pulls together into one solid mixture. There's no clumps of sugar, there's no clumps of butter, it's all together. So from there, we are going to add the eggs, the buttermilk, and the vanilla. So I'm gonna put this on the low stir function. I'm gonna take my egg and pour that in. Take our milk, pour that in. And then for our vanilla, we need 1 teaspoon. Now it's a little bit of a soupy mixture. So at the end of the day, this is going to make 12 Whoopie Pies. So you've kind of got this chunky mixture going on that doesn't look very appetizing, but we'll get there. All right, so it says beat until well combined, slowly add in the dry ingredients, mix until combined. So we're gonna take our dry ingredients back, and I am just gonna take a measuring cup to spoon them in little by little. Being very careful not to hit. So I don't know if you caught that, but my cat tripped on the cord to my light and took the whole thing out. So we're back and we'll continue. So as I was saying, you want to add the dry ingredients in slowly, scooping them in, being careful to avoid getting caught on the mixing tool. Crank up the speed a little bit, let it mix in a little more, and then I'm going to scrape down the sides and finish it off. Get the rest of that to mix in. So as with anything, you don't want to overmix the batter because we know that gluten in flour, if we develop that, it becomes tough and chewy, and we don't want tough, chewy whoopie pies. So we want to make sure that we mix it just until everything is nicely combined, and I'll show you what that looks like. All right, so scrape down the sides here. Smells delicious. Okay. So there you go. Basically looks like a chocolate cake batter. Makes sense? Whoopie pies are kind of a cake. So it says from here, using a 1 3/4 ounce ice cream scoop, place the batter on the parchment lined baking pan, 12 per pan, bake for 10 to 12 minutes. So we're going to do 12 on one, 12 on the other, and that's going to give us our 24, which is going to be the halves of each to give us a total of 12 actual whoopie pies. I like to use this size scoop. We'll see how that fits. We're probably potentially going to need to make 2 scoops, but we'll kind of see how those come out. The bigger you use of a scoop, the less you're going to get out of it. These will spread a bit, so you definitely want to make sure that you leave some space in between. A little trick that you can also use is you can even take a little custard dish and actually trace your circles on there to make sure that they all are evenly spaced, and that kind of gives you an idea of where to put things. We're going to move this out of the way, and we're going to scoop. Now my baking sheets are a little on the smaller side, so I'm not so sure I'm going to fit the full 12 on here. I think what I'm actually going to do is, I'm a little nervous about how close this is, so I think I'm actually going to scoop that up, and I'm going to try to do 4 and 4 and make it the full 8. I'm used to working with those half sheet pans at school, which are a little bit bigger. The more around you scoop them, the better they're going to hold their shape when they actually bake. So I'm basically filling my scoop and leveling it off on the edge of the bowl. It's really important that you keep them as equal in size as possible, because remember, they have to be sandwiched together, and if you've got a big one and a small one, they're not going to connect very well. So it is definitely really important to use something like a scoop that's going to give you a precise measure. So one of the things about baking 2 pans in the oven is that we are going to have to swap these halfway through. You want to make sure that your racks have enough space in between them so that the little bit of rise they have and the air can circulate, and then about halfway you'll flip-flop them back and forth. So it says we're going to bake for 10 to 12 minutes, and then we're going to let them cool, and we're going to repeat this with the remaining batter. So we will see you in a few. All right, so when they come out of the oven, we flipped it halfway through. They should look like cake. When you press on them, they should bounce back and they should feel spongy like a cake does. So we're gonna take these off of the sheet, we're gonna let them cool, and then we need to spoon out the rest of them, and then bake those, and then let them fully cool. And while they're fully cooling, we can make our Hungarian flour frosting. So let's finish this off. So the rubber spatula is one of my favorite tools in the kitchen. It does a really great job at scraping down all the little bits and pieces that are up on the sides. So we're gonna scoop our next set out, get that bacon in the oven. I'm hoping I can get one more out of the last bit of this so that I can have an even amount, so that I have partners for all of them. I think we can spatula enough out of here to make it happen. while these go to the oven, the bake time was about 10 minutes for these for my oven, and for the size that we scooped out, I flipped them halfway through, so we'll just repeat that process and we'll see you again to make the frosting. All right, so while our Whoopie Pies are cooling, we're gonna start working on our frosting. This particular recipe comes from a New York Times place. My mom always called it Hungarian flour frosting. They call it ermine icing. It actually requires you to cook some milk and flour until it almost becomes like a pudding-like consistency. Then you cream your butter and your sugar in the stand mixer, and then you end up adding them all together. So we're gonna get our mixture for the stovetop ready to go. I will cook that off camera, and then once that is fully cooled, we'll come back and we'll mix everything together and get it all set. So it says over medium heat, you're going to whisk flour and milk in a small saucepan and heat to a simmer, stirring frequently until it becomes thick and pudding-like. So simmer basically is a very slow, low boil. The reason that you do that with dairy products is that you don't want to scald or burn them. So it's really important that we make sure we don't overheat this, and it does usually require constant stirring and mixing to ensure that the milk is not burning. So this particular recipe actually has weight for flour, so although it has tablespoon measures, I'm gonna use the weight because that's more accurate, as we all know. So I'm gonna turn my scale on with my saucepan in there, and I'm gonna measure my flour right into there. We need 40 grams. So you're gonna be in charge of watching the scale for me.
So when it hits 40?
40, yep. So there's our 40 grams. And for the milk, it says 1 cup of milk. So we are going to measure out 1 cup of milk. So this is our milk. And as before, you want to get down at eye level. Make sure that your milk is accurate. Perfect. So again, whisk them in a saucepan and heat to simmer. So I'm going to just add this right in here. Then I'm going to give it a little bit of a whisk, and I'm going to take it to the stove and get it started. So right now it's pretty liquidy, doesn't look like too much, but once we get this cooked, it should be nice and thick and pudding-like. So we'll see you in a few. So we cooked up our milk and flour mixture, and as you can see, it's pretty thick, very pudding-like. We let it cool so that it is nice and chilled, and now we can continue with the rest of it. So in the stand mixer, we are supposed to cream together our butter and sugar until it's light and fluffy. So for the butter, it is 1 cup of unsalted butter softened. So 1 cup, as we know, is 2 sticks. So I'm gonna stick that in there. So for the sugar, it says that it's either 1 cup or 200 grams of granulated sugar. So like I said, I'm going to weigh because weight is much more accurate. So we're gonna turn this on with our bowl. And Sam, you wanna scoop that in until we get to 200? $45, 4. All right, perfect. There we have it, 200 grams. All right, so we're gonna add that into our stand mixer and cream our ingredients. Lock that down. Start it off on low. Remember to scrape down the sides of the bowl every now and then. And don't forget, if you are using a stand mixer, there's that little lip down at the bottom where sugar and things like to get caught, so you might want to just kind of make sure that there's nothing stuck underneath it. So that looks pretty light and fluffy, and now it says that we are going to gradually add the cooled flour mixture a little bit at a time, beat until it becomes light and fluffy and looks like whipped cream. So I'm gonna scrape down the sides again, and we're gonna start adding. takes a long time for things to become light and fluffy and to get to that whipped cream stage, and people give up too easily. So definitely give it time. I'd say we're pretty close, but I'm gonna let it whip just a little bit more and incorporate some more air to get a little more fluff to it. All right, so I'd say that looks pretty good. Has a pretty whipped cream texture to it. So we're just gonna scrape this down. Now Sam and I here have decided that we would like to experiment a little with our whoopie pie filling. So we are actually going to flavor this and color this. We're gonna do the half coconut, and then we'll leave the rest of it just the vanilla flavor that we've already added in here. And what are we doing for color?
We are doing blue.
Blue, okay. We doing the whole thing blue, or are we gonna do some blue and some something else?
I think just blue.
Okay. So again, scrape down the bowl. I'm just gonna eyeball what I think is about half of this, and we're gonna stick it into this other bowl. All right, so let's do just a couple drops. Remember, little goes a long way in food coloring. I'd say that's a pretty nice blue. So what I would recommend when you're filling your whoopie pies is to use a pastry bag. If you don't have a pastry bag, okay, this is a pastry bag. It usually is made sometimes from a disposable plastic. This one is a reusable one and washable. Usually there's an opening cut in there. If you don't have one of these, you can just use a regular old Ziploc baggie. And then basically this helps you kind of fill the inside of those whoopie pies in a really nice, easy manner, and it looks a little bit more professional than just kind of slopping it on there. But not to say that you can't just take a knife and spread the icing on the inside of your whoopie pies as well. All right, so we took all of our whoopie pies off of our parchment paper after they finished cooling, and we matched them up trying to make the right sizes fit with the right sizes. And so we actually ended up with 14, even though the recipe had called for 12. I'd say that's pretty close. Again, depending on the size of the scoop you use can really impact how many you end up with. So we are going to put this icing in our pastry bag. I'm not even going to put a tip on the bag because it's just got a round circular opening, which is really perfect for filling this. So I'm not even going to bother with that. I'm just going to stick the icing in here. Little trick about working with pastry bags and icing. A lot of times people will just try to fill it from here, and then it gets all over the place and it makes a mess. So what I always say is you want to fold down the top part of your pastry bag, gives you a little lipped edge. You can kind of cup your hand in there. Then you can take and you can put your icing in there and fill the bag that way. So now that I've got that filled, I can basically just fold that back up. I can grab my bag and I can just take and very gently press all that icing down into the bottom of the pastry bag so that it's easier. When you go to use a pastry bag, I usually grip it almost like it's a lobster claw. You just want to grip, and then you want to give it a twist, create some pressure in there, and then you use this part of your hand to squeeze as you're filling or doing whatever it is. Hopefully at some point later in the semester, I will get the opportunity to demonstrate some buttercream icing for you and kind of really go through this process in a little bit more detail. But for this purpose, I'll just give you the quick little overview. So you want to take your whoopie pie cakes, okay, open it up, just fill. Just like that. Okay. Take the other half, put it on there, and now you've got yourself a beautiful whoopie pie. now that we finished with our Whoopie Pies, Sam wanted to share our mascot, or our extra kitchen helper. This is Flash. Say hi for the camera, Flash. No Whoopie Pies for you. All right, guys. Well, I'm hoping that you will take the opportunity to try this recipe that I'm sharing with you. If you don't have the ingredients at home, understandable. You might be able to find other Whoopie Pie recipes that use different ingredients or different flavors. I'm guessing there's probably some vanilla ones out there. So, you know, if this one doesn't work for you, feel free to experiment. Let me know if you find something and I can take a look at it. And I hope you enjoy because they're super delicious. Bye.